Hello and welcome to today's mind map. We're going to be going over Can't Hurt Me by David Goggins, an incredibly inspirational book, and is telling the story of a man who went through an incredible transformation to become the man that you see on the cover. Now, David Goggins has just an amazing story, and I'm going to tell you all about that in the mind map, but first I want to tell you a little bit about how I learned of David Goggins. I was listening to the Joe Rogan podcast. I had little to no idea who David Goggins was, but he was the guest that day. And over the 3-hour-long podcast, David Goggins proceeded to absolutely blow my mind at the things that human beings are capable of. So I'm here to present this book to you as motivation, but also to pull some of the really tactical elements out of the book that David shares. Because David is so good at motivation, I could never match his ability to motivate you. So if you're looking just for motivation, I recommend you go and check out his YouTube channel. I recommend you go and check out some of the podcasts. But if you're looking for some real tactical things that are coming out of the book that you can use and put into your life right now, this mind map is going to be perfect for you. Now that you know how I got first introduced to David Goggins, let me introduce him to you. Now, he's a retired Navy SEAL and one of the only members of the U.S. Armed Forces to complete SEAL training, Army Ranger School, and Air Force Tactical Air Controller training. All of those are extremely difficult programs to actually get through, and even to be just one of those things is a huge accomplishment, but David Goggins was able to accomplish all three. He completed 60-plus ultramarathons, triathlons, and ultra-triathlons, which I didn't even know was a thing, but apparently those are very grueling races. Formerly held in the world record for doing 4,030 pull-ups in just 17 hours, which is absolutely unfathomable. He's a sought-after speaker, and now he's a best-selling author. I pulled out a quote from the book to kind of introduce you to the book, and you can see some of David's story and a little bit about what we're going to be talking about today. The first quote says this: Heraclitus, a philosopher born in the Persian Empire back in the 5th century BC, had it right when he wrote about men on the battlefield. Out of every 100 men, he wrote just 10 shouldn't be there. 80 are just targets, 9 are real fighters, and we are lucky to have them, for they make the battle. But the one is a warrior. From the time you take your first breath, you become eligible to die. You also become eligible to find your greatness and become the one warrior. But it is up to you to equip yourself for the battle ahead. And you can see where this book is going to be leading you, down that road, preparing you for that battle ahead. Only you can master your mind, which is what it takes to live a bold life filled with accomplishments most people consider beyond their capability. Continues on and he says, I'm not a genius like those professors at MIT, but I am the one warrior. And the story you are about to read, the story of my fucked up life, will illuminate a proven path to self-mastery and empower you to face reality. Hold yourself accountable, push past pain, learn to love what you fear, and relish failure. Live your life to your fullest potential and find out who you really are. And I think this one paragraph from the book really describes something I think is so interesting, because when I think of David Goggins, I think of a guy that's saying, get hard, man up, and do the things that you're afraid to do the things that you're too lazy to do, and etc. But what he says here is so important, and I don't think it should be missed. He says, will illuminate a proven path to self-mastery, right? He's telling us, hey, model what I've done. I'm not a special human. Obviously, he is a special human, but what he's saying essentially is that I'm just like any one of you. And you can do this as well. He had a really fucked up life and a really hard childhood. And if he can do it, then you can do it too. Human beings change through study, habit, and stories. And that's what I'm going to share with you today. My study of David Goggins' book. So really this book is about the story of a warrior. And David Goggins, again, like he said, he is that one warrior. Out of 100 men, there's only one of him. David Goggins is the epitome of the word warrior, in my opinion. He's a Navy SEAL, an Army Ranger, a world record holder, ultra-endurance athlete, and an extreme motivator. As I said before, any one of those things would be a great thing to accomplish in one's life, but David has been able to do that and so much more. But he wasn't always that way. See, David had an incredibly tough childhood. He goes through this in the book, and it's really quite a terrifying childhood. I mean, from someone who came from a fairly good childhood, it really is illuminating on what's going on out there in the world. He goes through it in the book, and I'm not going to share a ton of that story of his early childhood because I think it's best told by David. I recommend that you go and pick up the audiobook. Such an empowering audiobook. He actually did a very interesting format, almost a podcast style format for the audiobook. I recommend you go and pick that up. But he goes through that in the book, in the audiobook, much more than I could do in the mind map. Again, I'm just going to try and share some tactical things that you'll be able to implement into your life. That childhood had him feeling sorry for himself at one point, and probably for a large part of his life, David was really just kind of feeling sorry for himself and seeing all the things that happened in his life as negative things. And we're going to talk about the mindset shift that he used to become David Goggins when he was actually a 297-pound exterminator who probably couldn't have motivated much of anyone, let alone even just himself. So what follows is a story full of motivation and mental tactics to get you just a little bit closer to becoming a warrior. If you want to learn more about David and his story, I recommend that you pick up his book because, of course, in this one mind map, I can't do his entire story justice. But the first point, the first tactical thing that I pulled out of the book is called Truth Hurts. You are giving up instead of getting hard. That's what David says in the book. Tell the truth about the real reasons for your limitations, and you will turn that negativity, which is real, into jet fuel. Those odds stacked against you will become a damn runway. And this is the first point that we're going to talk about with this mindset shift that David is going to take us through in this book. There is no more time to waste. Hours and days evaporate like creeks in the desert. That's why it's okay to be cruel to yourself, as long as you realize you're doing it to become better. We all need thicker skin to improve in life. Being soft when you look in the mirror isn't going to inspire the wholesale changes we need to shift our present and open up our future. And I really like this quote specifically because it's so much the opposite of a lot of what we're taught. David's coming from a more stoic philosophy when a lot of self-help and personal empowerment and personal improvement style books are teaching you kind of the opposite of trying to look at the good things in life and how that can motivate you. And while I think that's definitely true, this is kind of an about face. If one thing is true, quite often the opposite is true. That's kind of the power of duality. This might be even more true for you than some of the other things that I've shared on this channel before. The morning after that first session with the accountability mirror, I trashed the shag steering wheel and fuzzy dice. I tucked my shirt in and wore my pants with the belt. And once school started up again, I stopped eating my lunch at my lunch table. For the first time, being liked and acting cool were a waste of my time. And instead of eating with all the popular kids, I found my own table and ate alone. So it's very interesting. This is kind of a story of a man shedding a lot of the beliefs and shedding a lot of the paradigms that society puts on us. How, especially in high school, acting cool is the most important thing for most kids. And a lot of us are bringing that into our adulthood as well. Mind you, the rest of my progress could not be described as a blink and you'll miss it metamorphosis. So he's saying that even when he made this mindset shift back in the day, it didn't necessarily happen all at once, which, of course, we all know it never does. Lady Luck did not suddenly show up, run me a hot soapy bath, and kiss me like she loved me. In fact, the only reason I didn't become just another statistic is because at the last possible moment, I got to work. So he talks about being a statistic in the book, and I'll share a little bit about that right now. He's saying essentially all the odds were actually against him, and that's the truth. All the odds were absolutely against David when he first started. And a statistic is basically saying if the odds are all against you, you're likely going to become kind of a deadbeat, so to speak. And he's saying the only reason that he didn't become just another statistic is because at the last possible moment, I got to work. And that's an empowering thing. He got to work. And the accountability mirror is the big takeaway for me here in this kind of truth hurts point. And as you can see, he's intense. But aren't we all craving a little bit of that intensity in our lives, a little bit of that stoic philosophy in our lives? I know I certainly am. So often we're too easy on ourselves. People often around us, they don't want to hurt our feelings, so they'll talk about the best things that are the best things about us, and they'll actually do the opposite of what we really need, about telling us some of our weaknesses and some of the areas that we could improve. And also, we're often too afraid to really see ourselves as we are in that accountability mirror. So we're talking about standing in front of the mirror and looking at your physical appearance, but for you guys, people that are here for personal development, that only really comprises one small aspect of who you are. You want to look in the mirror in your business. You want to look in the mirror in your intellectual life. You want to look in the mirror in your relationships and all those sort of things. Look at yourself as objectively as possible. And that's essentially what the accountability mirror is. When you look at yourself in the physical mirror, what do you see? And what are the things that you're not proud of? Where could you be doing better? Here's one other quote from the book and how David puts it in the book. If you look into the mirror and you see a fat person, don't tell yourself that you need to lose a couple pounds. Tell the truth. You're fucking fat. It's okay. Just say you're fat if you're fat. The dirty mirror that you see every day is going to tell you the truth every time. So why are you still lying to yourself? So you can feel better for just a few minutes and stay the fucking same. If you're fat, you need to change the fact that you're fat because it's very fucking unhealthy. I know because I've been there. And again, you can take that and just say, what areas could I improve in my life objectively? And where am I kind of coddling myself and making myself feel better about my shortcomings simply because I can feel better for the few minutes and in the end, I'll stay the fucking same. And this might sound harsh, but here's how I look at it. I see some of the harshness of David Goggins and see real empathy behind it. Because he's come from a place that a lot of us feel like maybe we're in right now or that we've been before. See beauty behind the things that you hate. Maybe it's about yourself, about your business, about your intellectual life, about your relationships. Those things that make you uncomfortable. Those are the things that you should be paying attention to. You need to confront those things head on. That feeling of uncomfortability about those specific things that you're too afraid to look at is going to drive you to become better. And my advice to you is don't ignore them. Tap into it. Really look at your life. What are you feeling about the certain things that are going on in your life? And how can you use that feeling, that even if it's a negative feeling, to motivate yourself towards success? The next point that I pulled out is bring your best. Once you're in the heat of battle, it comes down to staying power. If it's a difficult physical challenge, you will probably have to defeat your own demons before you can take your opponent's soul. This is a big part of the book in taking souls, and that's just kind of the way that he was motivating himself through a lot of the things in his life. I won't go too deep into it because I don't know if it's super important for this mind map. That means rehearsing answers to the simple question that is sure to rise up in a thought bubble, like why am I here? If you know that moment is coming and have your answer ready, you will be equipped to make the split-second decision to ignore your weakened mind and keep moving. Know why you're in the fight to stay in the fight. This is one thing that my coach recently worked on with me, is having the why am I here, and not only having the why am I here, but having so many why am I here's that I can look at when I'm feeling down or feeling discouraged about some of the things that I've been able to accomplish. This is one of the very first things, ever since my coach worked with me, I'm going hard and really trying to help people figure out why am I here in my coaching. And he continues on here, he says, and never forget that all emotional and physical anguish is finite. It all ends eventually. Smile at pain and watch it fade for at least a second or two. If you can do that, you can string those seconds together and last longer than your opponent thinks you can. And that may be enough to catch a second wind. Continuing on, he says, there is no scientific consensus on second wind. Some scientists think that it's the result of endorphins flooding your nervous system. Others think it's a burst of oxygen that can help you break down lactic acid, as well as the glycogen and triglycerides muscle needs to perform. Some say it's purely psychological. He says, All I know is that by going hard when we felt defeated, we were able to ride a second wind through the worst night of Hell Week. And once you have the second wind behind you, it's easy to break your opponents down and snatch your soul. The hard part is getting to that point, because the ticket to victory often comes down to bringing your very best when you feel your worst. And what is that, bringing your very best when you feel your worst? Really, to me, that's staying power. So think about this. Are you trying something difficult? As Goggins points out here, this is during Hell Week, by the way, when he's talking about snatching souls in his book. Very, very motivational part, and very interesting to see inside the mind of this incredibly high performer. Goggins points out here that it often doesn't take any special skills, right? And they talk about Hell Week, how some guys were extremely physical. They talk about how some guys were extremely smart, have been through all sorts of different trainings, and it did not matter. All that really mattered was this staying power, right? It's not going to take a certain amount of connections, skills, etc., especially if you're in business. Quite often, connections are great, special skills are great, and etc., but what's really going to work out in your favor is staying power, knowing how to get up, knowing how to find opportunity, and continuing to go after it day after day. When I first started my online business, I had little to no experience in the marketing field, but I was able to grow that up into $10,000 a month in monthly reoccurring revenue, with enough time to be able to do these mind maps, enough time to be able to really enjoy my life, simply because I stuck to it. I kept learning, and I kept going after what I knew I wanted. When I read this, I think of Rocky. Now, I'm an old boxer. I've been in quite a few boxing bouts, and I really love the Rocky movies. So he says in the movie something similar to, how hard can you get hit and keep getting back up? And I always think of that as the true secret to success. Goggins is talking about physical feats here, but really, where doesn't this apply? Are you trying to make more sales? How many calls are you willing to make? Are you trying to grow your business? How much more are you willing to work than your competition is? And that's why I'm doing 3 books a week on my channel right now. I mean, who else is going to have that type of discipline and staying power to be able to create a successful YouTube channel, which is ultimately my goal here, and to provide great content for you guys as well. So our next point is Armoured Mind. Really great quote. He says that time stood still as I realized for the first time that I'd always looked at my entire life, everything I'd been through, from the wrong perspective. Yes, all the abuse I'd experienced and the negativity I had to push through challenged me to my core. But in that moment, I stopped seeing myself as the victim of bad circumstances and saw my life as the ultimate training ground instead. My disadvantages had been callousing my mind all along and had prepared me for the moment in that pool with Psycho Pete. Another interesting story. I recommend that you pick up the book to learn about snatching souls and Psycho Pete, but it's very interesting. This is about the mindset shift, right? We'll talk a little bit more about this in my part here about victims of bad circumstances. For now, I'm going to continue on with the quote. I remember my very first day in the gym back in Indiana. My palms were soft and quickly got torn up by the bars because they weren't accustomed to gripping steel. But over time, after thousands of reps, my palms built up thick calluses as protection. The same principle works when it comes to mindset. Very interesting analogy. Until you experience hardships like abuse and bullying, failures and disappointments, your mind will remain soft and exposed. Life experience, especially negative experiences, help callous the mind. But it's up to you where that callus lines up. If you choose to see yourself as a victim of circumstance into adulthood, that callus will become resentment, that protects you from the unfamiliar. It will make you too cautious and untrusting and possibly too angry at the world. So he's talking about how essentially when we get into a thought pattern or a behavior pattern or a belief system, what happens is we get calloused into that belief system. And that's just the way that we see the world. Very interesting analogy. I never heard it put this way before. It will make you fearful of change and hard to reach, but not hard of mind. That's where I was as a teenager. But after my second Hell Week, I'd become someone new. I'd fought through so many horrible situations by then and remained open and ready for more. And this is kind of a theme of David Goggins, not only in the book, but in all of his teachings, is Essentially, instead of putting yourself into an area where you're getting calloused to be afraid, a callous to be anxious, callous to not work out or to be lazy. Instead of doing that, you want to put yourself in those situations consistently and become calloused to those things, just like the hands when you go and work out. He continues on, he says, my ability to stay open represented a willingness to fight for my own life, which allowed me to withstand hailstorms of pain and use it to callous over my victim's mentality. That shit was buried under layers of sweat and hard fucking flesh, and I was starting to callous over my fears too. That realization gave me the mental edge I needed to outlast Psycho Pete one more time. So you can see, he says here, my ability to stay open, right? Open to experiences, open to doing all these things that are extremely uncomfortable is what allowed him to kind of change his mentality and change his belief system in order to do some of the amazing things that he'd been able to do. So, victim of bad circumstances. This is a very powerful shift in the book, and Goggins is really going through this transformation with us in the book. That's something that I really appreciate. Something I think we can all look at for inspiration. See, Goggins had one hell of a childhood. Nobody would blame him for thinking of himself as the victim. But even those of us without a terrible childhood often look at ourselves as the victims of circumstance. Often we think about how this person did that, or that person did this to us, and that caused us to fail or caused us some sort of hardship. We all can fall into that in some instances. Inside this excerpt, we can see how harmful seeing ourselves as the victim can be. By blaming others, we really are not taking responsibility for ourselves, which is leaving us weak and giving up control to everyone else. Instead of seeing ourselves as the victim, try asking yourself these questions. How did this circumstance teach me something? How can I use this negative event to push me forward? Where can I actually try to put myself into difficult situations to callous myself to hardship? Very great questions to ask. And Goggins is kind of all about putting yourself into these hard situations so that you may become hard as well. You may become the type of person to overcome. And I think I'm foreshadowing the next point here about removing the governor. The main objective here is to slowly start to remove the governor for your brain. This is a very important point. It's one that I talked about a little bit in the beginning as well. First, a quick reminder of how this process works. In 1999, when I weighed 297 pounds, my first run was a quarter mile. That's all he could run. Fast forward to 2007, and I ran 205 miles in 39 hours, nonstop. Ridiculous. Amazing. I didn't get there overnight, and I don't expect you to either. And this is a point that I think so many people miss about David Goggins. He doesn't expect you to become hard overnight. He doesn't expect you to do miraculous things overnight, but he does expect you to get there. Your job is to push past your normal stopping point, where you normally would stop. Just push past that a little bit every single day. Whether you're running on a treadmill or doing a set of push-ups, get to the point where you are so tired and in pain that your mind is begging you to stop. Then push just 5 to 10% further. If the most push-ups you have ever done is 100 in a workout, do 105 or 110. If you normally run 30 miles each week, run 10% more. The bottom line is that life is one big mind game. The only person you are playing against is yourself. Stick with the process, and soon what you thought was impossible will be something that you do every fucking day. All right? So it's not what you think. What you normally think of David Goggins is get hard and do it overnight. That's at least what I thought. But this book is giving you a process, and he's explaining that here. When I first came across Goggins, I was super motivated to get out and get after it. He just kind of has that effect on you. But as many people have probably realized over their dosing of Goggins, after overdosing on Goggins, it's that motivation isn't all that it takes. Instead, it's a process of removing the governor that your body and mind both have, right? Because he's talking about physical stuff here again, but the mind and body are almost exactly the same. Getting out of your comfort zone again and again, leading towards some amazing changes that Goggins made and many people following him have accomplished. This is talked about in personal development quite a lot. The idea of just getting 1% better every single day, David says 5 to 10% here. 1% is also another thing that's talked about quite a lot in Atomic Habits by James Clear, The Slight Edge by Jeff Olson, and The Compound Effect by Darren Hardy. So many people are talking about this. It's a great phenomenon. I love the idea of the compound effect and the way Goggins explains it, because I think most books, including the ones that I've already mentioned, tell you how easy it really is to improve 1% a day. But they forgot that 1% improvement is still going past your rate limiter or your governor. Not past your potential, but past where you've previously gone. So it's going to be a fight every single time, even to scrape a 1% improvement. How can you get past your rate limiter today? Think about this. How far do you usually run or walk? How long do you usually work? What do you usually eat? How can you push yourself past all of those governors, all of those stopping points, and get just a little bit better today? Now, the last point here is a boatload of pull-ups. I hope I've made these inspiring enough for you to be able to remember them. Here's the main point I got from a boatload of pull-ups. He says in the book, that doesn't mean I was having fun. I wasn't. I was over it. I didn't want to do pull-ups anymore, but achieving goals or overcoming obstacles doesn't have to be fun. Seeds burst from the inside out in a self-destructive ritual of new life. Does that sound like fucking fun? What an interesting analogy. I hadn't heard that one before either. Like it feels good? I wasn't in the gym to get happy or do what I wanted to be doing. I was there to turn myself inside out, if that's what it took, to blast through any and all mental, emotional, and physical barriers. So he's talking about all these different types of barriers, mental, emotional, and physical. I feel like in the book he talks a lot about physical barriers, but of course you can use this in any part of your life. Just to restate again, David Goggins did 4,030 pull-ups in 17 hours. Now, to put that into perspective, it's likely more pull-ups than the average gym goer is doing in a year. And he did it in just 17 hours. It's quite amazing. During this chapter, Goggins explains what it was like to accomplish this world record. Amazing chapter. I recommend you pick up the book. But don't think this chapter is about success, right? This headline number looks really seductive. And how good it feels to have accomplished something. Like he says here, seeds burst from the inside. They create this wonderful, miraculous flower or tree or whatever it is. But it begins with self-destructive ritual. So interesting. Actually, this whole entire thing, Goggins failed this world record twice before he accomplished the goal. And one of them was on live television. Imagine how difficult it must have been to go back to it. Imagine how difficult, especially after doing such a hard workout. I mean, this must have just wrecked him for weeks, if not months afterwards. It's a crazy goal. Not something normal people would probably set. So why keep going? And it's very interesting the way that Goggins is setting goals and the way that I would recommend you guys set goals as well. Because the beauty isn't in accomplishing this goal, in the accomplishment of this goal. It is in the suffering and transformation required to be the person who accomplishes this goal, right? Tony Robbins, Brian Tracy, all these people talk about setting goals because you have to become the type of person who will accomplish those goals. Not because you're going to achieve a certain amount of money, achieve a certain amount of success, but set goals so that you have to become a new type of person to be able to accomplish them. For me, this is what goal setting is all about. It's not what can I achieve that will fulfill me, but instead it's who will I need to become in order to achieve this. I want to thank you for being with me here today on this video. I really, really appreciate David Goggins for writing this book. If any of you are interested in a free one-on-one coaching session with me, please visit the link down below. We can talk about anything from business. We can talk about anything from lifestyle businesses, online businesses, content creation. But we can also talk about some of the things in this book or any of the other books that I've done mind maps on. I'd be really excited to connect with my audience and talk to some of you guys one-on-one. Thanks so much, and I will see you in the next mind map.